Hey everybody, I am Real Angel Amdalimpinas and I am one of the reporter of Group 5.
We will be discussing Chapter 5, The Virtue of Ethics.
The objectives of this chapter are after reading this chapter, you should be able to discuss the meaning and basic principles of virtue ethics, distinguish virtuous acts from non-virtuous acts, and apply Aristotle's ethics in understanding the Filipino character. Let's move on to the introduction. An online news account narrates key officials from both the legislative and executive branches of the government voicing out their concern on the possible ill effect of too much violence seen by children on television. The news estimates that by the time children reach 18 years old, they will have watched around 18,000 simulated murder scenes. This prompted then Department of Education Secretary Brother Armin Luistro to launch the implementing guidelines of the Children's Television Act of 1997 in order to regulate television shows and promote more child-friendly programs. Ultimately, for Brother Luistro, to regulate television programs would help in the development of children's values. According to the news article, the Department of Education held a series of consultations with various stakeholders to address the issue of exposure of children to TV violence. They also implemented the rules and guidelines for viewing safety and created a television violence rating code to be applied in all TV programs. Lastly, they also set 15% of television airtime for shows conducted to children. Luistro's claim seems to be based on a particular vision of childhood development. Children at a young age have not yet achieved full personal growth and mental development. This situation makes them particularly vulnerable to possible undesirable effects of seeing violent images presented on television. When they see violence on television on a regular basis, they may consider such violent acts as normal and part of the daily occurrences in life. Much worse is that they might tend to believe that such acts, sins committed by adults, are permissible. In these situations, the saying, "life imitates art," unfortunately becomes uncomfortably true. Example, kung nakita na ako sa Facebook or internet, ginapasagdaan lang niya iyang anak na nagawatch og Cocomelon. Then, dito niya napansin nga, gina-imitate siyang anak kung unsay ginaingon sa kanta. So, for example, ato ko tong kanta nga, if you're angry and you know it, just something, ihapak ka daw imuhang ulo. So, natingala siya every time nga magmaoy daw yung anak. Anong ginahapak daw niya ang ulo? So, mao to siya example sa gina-imitate sa mga bata ang usa makita nila sa television. There have been numerous studies on the effects of television violence on children. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, for instance, enumerated the harmful effects of television violence, such as being insensitive to the possible consequences brought about by watching violent shows. The study also suggests that children exposed to television violence begin to imitate what they'd observe and consider violence as a way to solve problems. Mature individuals are aware that it is vital for children to go through the process of building their personality, identity, or character. How does the continuous exposure to violence on television affect the character that children develop? Is it possible that constant watching of violence on television results in aggression among children? What is the role of the child's environment in her capacity to develop into a good individual? These questions are real concerns that society needs to address. Perhaps it is best to look closely at how good moral character is developed among individuals. What elements are involved in order to achieve this? One theory that can possibly provide a comprehensive understanding of how an individual can develop moral character is virtue ethics. Before we proceed to the main topic, let us have a little background about Aristotle. So Aristotle was born in Macedonia and studied philosophy under Plato in Athens. He was considered to be the brightest among Plato's students in the former school, the Academy. He later founded his own school, Lyceum, where he became a very productive intellectual, having written numerous works on different topics such as the theoretical and practical sciences and logic. He was also known to be the tutor of Alexander the Great, who tried to conquer the world. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is his major work in moral philosophy. What is virtue ethics? Virtue ethics is the ethical framework that is concerned with understanding the good as a matter of developing the virtuous character of a person. Previous chapters emphasized the different aspects of ethics: consequences of an act for utilitarianism, natural inclinations for natural law, and autonomy for deontology. So virtue ethics, on the other hand, focuses on the formation of one's character brought about by determining and doing virtuous acts. The two major thinkers of ancient Greece, Plato and Aristotle, had discourses concerning virtue, but Aristotle's book entitled Nicomachean Ethics is the first comprehensive and programmatic study of virtue ethics. Aristotle's discourse of ethics departs from the Platonic understanding of reality and conception of the good. Both Plato and Aristotle affirm rationality as the highest faculty of a person, and having such characteristics enables a person to realize her very purpose of her existence. But at the end, they differ in their appreciation of reality and nature, which in turn results in the contrasting stand on what that ethical principle should be. For Plato, the real is outside the realm of any human sensory experience, but can somehow be grasped by one intellect. The truth and ultimately, the good are in the sphere of forms or ideas transcending daily human condition. On the other hand, for Aristotle, the real is found within our everyday encounter with objects in the world. What makes nature intelligible is its character of having both form and matter. Therefore, the truth and the good cannot exist apart from the objects and are not independent of our experience. When one speaks of the truth, for example, how beautiful Hualuna's polarium is, she cannot discuss its beauty separately from the particular painting itself. Same is true with understanding the good. The particular act of goodness that one does in the world is more important than any conception of the good that is outside and beyond the realm of experience. One sees the ethical theory of Aristotle is engaging the good in our day-to-day living. That is the end of my report, and let's proceed to happiness and ultimate purpose.
Good day everyone, my name is John Paul Iganados and my assigned report is all about happiness and ultimate purpose. So this topic, happiness and ultimate purpose, is one of the best topics in chapter 5. By the way, chapter 5 tackles about virtue ethics. So what does virtue means? Virtue is a behavior showing a high moral standards. And how about ethics? Ethics, generally speaking, is a matter about the good thing needed to push you and what things that needed to be avoided. It is about the acceptable and unacceptable human behavior, recognizing the notion good and bad, right and wrong, by the primary concern of ethics. Happiness and ultimate purpose. Aristotle begins his discussion of ethics by showing that every act that a person does is directed toward a particular purpose, aim, or what the Greeks called telos. For the purpose of the good, that it gives sustenance to the body. A person pursues a chosen career, aiming for a good, that is, to provide a better future for her family. A person will not do anything which is not beneficial to her. Even a drug user think that substance abuse will cause her good. This does not necessarily mean that using drugs is good, but a drug addict would want to believe that such act is good. Therefore, for Aristotle, the good is considered to be the telos of purpose for which all acts seek to achieve. One must understand that an individual does actions and pursuits in life, and correspondingly, each of these activities has different aims. Aristotle is aware that one does an act not only to achieve a particular purpose, but also believes such purpose can be utilized for a higher goal or activity, which then can be used to achieve an even higher purpose, and so on. In other words, the different goods that one pursues for a hierarchy of teloi, the plural form of telos. Aristotle says, a certain difference is found among ends. Some are activities, others are products apart from the activities that produce them. Where there are ends apart from the actions, it is the nature of the products to be better than the activities. Now, as there are many actions, arts, and science, their ends also are many. The end of the medical art is health, that of shipbuilding a vessel, that of strategy victory, that of economics wealth. But where such arts fall under a single capacity, as bridle making, and the other arts concerned with the equipment of horses fall under the art of riding, and every military action under strategy. In the same way, other arts fall under yet others. In all of this, the ends of the master arts are to be prepared to all the subordinate ends, for it is for the sake of the former that the latter is pursued. When one diligently writes down notes while listening to a lecture given by the teacher, she does this for the purpose of being able to remember the lessons of the course. This purpose of remembering, in turn, becomes an act to achieve a higher aim, which is to pass the examinations given by the teacher, which then becomes a product that can help the person attain the goal of having a passing mark in the course. It is important for Aristotle that one becomes clear of the hierarchy of goals that the different acts produce in order for a person to distinguish which actions are higher than the other. With the condition that there is a hierarchy of telos, Aristotle then asks about the highest purpose, which is the ultimate good of a human being. Aristotle discusses the general criteria in order for one to recognize the highest good of a man. First, the highest good of a person must be final. As a final end, it is no longer utilized for the sake of arriving at a much higher end. In our example above, the purpose of remembering the lessons in the course, that is why one writes down notes, is not the final aim, because it is clear that such purpose is aimed at achieving a much higher goal. Second, the ultimate telos of a person must be self-sufficient. Satisfaction in life is arrived at once this highest good is attained. Nothing else is sought after and desired once this self-sufficient goal is achieved, since this is already considered as the best possible good in life. Again, in the example given above, the goal of remembering the lessons in the course is not yet the best possible good, because a person can still seek for other more satisfying goals in her life. So what is the highest goal for Aristotle? What goal is both final and self-sufficient? It is interesting to note that for Aristotle, the question can only be adequately answered by older individuals, because they have gone through enormous and challenging life experiences, which help them gain a wealth of knowledge on what the ultimate purpose of a person is. According to Aristotle, older individuals would agree that the highest purpose and the ultimate good of a man is happiness, or for the Greeks, eudaimonia. Aristotle says, now, such a thing, happiness, above all else, is held to be. For this we choose always itself and never for the sake of something else, but honor, leisure, reason, and every virtue we choose ended for themselves. For if nothing resulted from them, we should still choose each of them. But we choose them also for the sake of happiness, judging that by means of them we shall be happy. Happiness, on the other hand, no one chooses for the sake of this, nor, in general, for anything other than itself. One can therefore say that happiness seems to fit the first criterion of being final end of a human being, for it is clear that conditions for having wealth, power, and pleasures are not chosen for themselves, but for the sake of being a means to achieve happiness. If one accumulates wealth, for example, she would want to have not just richness, but also power and other desirable things as well, such as honor and pleasures. But all of these ends are ultimately for the sake of the final end, which is happiness. In itself, happiness seems to be the final end and the highest good of a person, since no other superior end is still being desired for. Aristotle continues in saying that happiness is also the self-sufficient view. He says, let us examine this question, however, on another occasion. The self-sufficient we now define as that which, when isolated, makes life miserable and lacking on nothing, and such we think happiness to be, and further we think it most desirable of all things, without being counted as one good thing among others. If it were so counted, it would clearly be made more desirable by addition of even the least of goods. For that which is added becomes an excess of goods, and of goods the greater is always more desirable. Happiness for Aristotle is the only self-sufficient aim that one can aspire for. No amount of wealth or power can be more fulfilling than having achieved that condition of happiness. One can imagine a life of being wealthy, powerful, and experiencing pleasurable feelings, and yet, such life is still not satisfying without happiness. Happiness is achieved in things such as wealth, power, and pleasurable feelings just give value-added benefits in life. The true measure of well-being for Aristotle is not by means of richness or fame, but by the condition of having attained a happy life. Even though older individuals agree that happiness is the highest end and good that humans aspire for, there are various opinions on what specifically is the nature of the ultimate telos of a person. One is that happiness is attached with having wealth and power. Others associate happiness with feelings that are pleasurable. Some take nobler things like honor and other ideals as constitutive of happiness. For Aristotle, arguing for or against every opinion proves to be a futile attempt to arrive at the nature of happiness. Instead, Aristotle shows that one can arrive at the ultimate good by doing one's function well. How does a person arrive at her highest good? According to Aristotle, if an individual's action can achieve the highest good, then one must investigate how she functions, which enables her to achieve her ultimate purpose. If she performs her function well, then she is capable of arriving at happiness. Aristotle then proceeds with discussing the function of human beings to distinguish one person's activity from other beings. How does a human being function, which sets her apart from the rest? For Aristotle, what defines human beings is her function or activity of reason. This function makes her different from the rest of beings. Aristotle expresses this clearly. What then can this be? Life seems to be a common even to plants, but we are seeking what is peculiar to man. Let us include, therefore, the life of nutrition and food. Next, there would be a life of perception, but it also seems to be a common even to the horse, the ox, and every animal. There remains, then, an active life of the element that has a rational principle. Of this, one part has such principle in the sense of being obedient to one, the other in the sense of possessing one and exercising them. If the function of a human being is simply to do the act of taking in food in order to sustain her life and continue living, then what makes her different from plants? Also, if the function of a human being is to do the act of perceiving things, then what makes her different from animals? What defines a person, therefore, is her function or activity of reason. A person's action to be considered as truly human must be an act that is always in accordance to reason. The function of a human being is to act following the dictates of reason. Any person, for that matter, utilizes her reason, but Aristotle further says that a person cannot only perform her function, but she can also perform it well. A dancer, for example, becomes different from a chef because of her function to dance, while the chef is to cook. Any dancer can dance, but what makes her distinct from an excellent dancer is that the latter dances very well. The same principle applies to human beings. What distinguishes a good person from other human beings is a rational activity that is performed well or excellently. A good individual, therefore, stands closer to meeting the conditions of happiness because her actions are of a higher purpose. Aristotle says, now, if the function of a man is an activity of the soul, which follows or implies a rational principle, and if we say, a so and so, and a good so and so, have a function which is the same kind. For example, a lyre player and a good lyre player, and so without qualification in all cases. Eminence in respect of goodness being added to the name of the function. For the function of a lyre player is to play the lyre, and that of a good lyre player is to do so well. If this is the case, and we state the function of man to be a certain kind of life, and this to be an activity or actions of the soul implying a rational principle, and the function of a good man to be the good and noble performance of this. And if any action is well performed, when it is performed in accordance with the appropriate excellence. If this is the case, human good turns out to be activity of soul in accordance to virtue. And if there is more than one virtue, in accordance with the best and most complete. The local saying, madaling maging tao, mahirap magpakatao, can be understood in the light of Aristotle's thoughts on the function of a good person. Any human being can perform the activity of reason. Thus, being human is achievable. However, a good human being strives hard in doing an activity in an excellent way. Therefore, the task of being human becomes more difficult because doing such activity will take more.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. I am Gorion Carlito Jr., the next presenter of this group. My assigned topic was all about the virtue as excellence according to Aristotle. Okay. According to Aristotle, virtue, irite in a Greek word, or excellence is defined as a mean between two extremes of excess and defect in regard to a feeling or action as the practically wise person would determine it. What he meant by this is that virtue is a kind of idealized capability or ability that we possess. Everyone has a different virtues depending on where they're good at. For instance, someone might have the virtue of being athleticism, and while other person might have the virtues of being physically beautiful. The key idea here is that virtuous people are those who are excel at something. They are the ones who perform to the highest standard in their chosen field. According to Aristotle, to be an excellent virtuous person is to determine good and righteous action. We need to know what is good and bad. Also, this virtuous excellence is not only deals with the rightness or wrongness of an individual action. It provides guidance as to sort of characteristics and behavior of a good persons we seek to achieve. Okay, next. What makes a human being excellence? Okay, according to Aristotle, the excellence is an activity of the human soul, and therefore, one needs to understand the very structure of a person's soul, which must be directed by her or him or her national activity in an excellent way. According to Aristotle, human soul is divided into two parts. First is the irrational element, and second is the rational faculty. Okay, first let's go on the irrational element. In rational element, there are two subparts, the vegetative and the appetitive aspects. What is vegetative aspects? Okay, vegetative aspects functions as giving nutrition and providing the activity of physical growth in a person. Meaning, vegetative side is concerned with the basic needs that keep us alive, and it's effectively our survival instincts. For the appetitive aspects, works as a desiring faculty of man, the act of desiring in itself as an impulse that naturally runs counter to reason and most of the time refuses to go along with reasons. Okay, next let's move on the rational faculty. In rational faculty, we have the intellectual excellence and the moral excellence. What is intellectual excellence? Intellectual excellence, this emphasizes the primary role of the long process education. And intellectual virtue requires the accumulation of experience and knowledge over time through qualified teachers. Aristotle stated that this means in order to understand to be an excellence is you must have a proper intellect and knowledge to determine what is right from wrong to discipline ourselves. In intellectual excellence, it concerns the act of knowing. Okay, next is moral excellence. According to Aristotle, it attributes to our habits or customs those repeated practices that form us in a certain way in each situation. In this statement, Aristotle wants us to understand to be that to be excellent cannot be attained in just one try, but it needs to be repeated for it to be polished. Repeated practices is a must because we all have weaknesses and that needs to improve through hard work, perseverance, fair dealing business, general truthfulness, and courageous action in welfare. In moral excellence, it concerns the act of doing. Okay. Simply put, for moral and intellectual, it weighs up knowledge and help us arrive on decision. It holds that it holds the knowledge that are factual and for the debate of priority. In order for us individual to achieve excellence, we need to encounter bad days. Example are failures, difficulties, and problems because that would give us basis and how to overcome another incoming problems in life. Okay? According to Aristotle, one does not become an excellent person overnight. This means that being a virtuous cannot be accomplished by a single act. We need to take it step by step to get closer to be an excellent. Being an excellent individual works on doing well day-to-day existence. And that's all of my report, ma'am. Thank you and God bless.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rachel V. Entrampas, and my assigned topic is Moral Virtue and Mesotes. As stated by Aristotle, developing a practical wisdom involves learning from experiences. So, according to him, kung ganahan kuno ta makagain o practical wisdom, we need to learn from our own experience. Like, dili ta mahadlok experience sa mga opportunities mo try sa bisan unsa nga mga opportunities nga maabot sa atua, bisan wala ta kabalo if tama ba ni siya para sa tuwa or mali ba ni siya ug unsa ba ang mga consequences ani niya. Because from the time that we commit mistakes, that's also the time that we acquire practical wisdom. Practical because we experience it. Dili ang laing tao naka-experience tapos na-develop ni mo practical wisdom. Dili na siya ingana. Kita mismo sa tong kaugalingon, ma-develop na to ang practical wisdom pinaagi sa pag-experience nato sa mga butang-butang. dapat ma-experience yun na to siya. Dili siya theoretical, dili siya gikan sa libro nga gaingon nga it is the right thing to do para buhaton na to siya. Dili siya ingana. Gikan jud siya sa tong experiences. Syempre, di ba, og magkamali ta, na jud tay ma-learn. So, katong na-learn na to, makonsider na siya as practical wisdom. Makonsider na siya as na-develop na to ang atoang practical wisdom. Knowing the right thing to do when one is confronted by a choice is not easy. As a person, sometimes it is very complicated to know what is the right thing to do. It's not easy to decide, especially when we need to choose between two person, things, or other. Labaw na og naay sacrifices nga involved. Yan, so in order to be sure, we need to check the rational faculty. Possibly nga naay dapat i-correct, dapat nga tama nga buhaton, or decision nga atong i-apply sa ato ang pag-decide. So, ingana siya. As we grow older, we tend to become mature. Yes, as we grow older, atong mindset mas pod nga nagka-level up. As we grow older, we want a peaceful life, peaceful mind, and peaceful surroundings. That's why some people wants to live in a place like Mingaw ug makabuhat sila on what is the right thing to do para nila in order to relax. Because their wisdom is something to try another experiences. For example, if humana sila diri nga city, humana sila sa bisan unsa nga lugar nga nahuman nila na nasa experience, mao na nga gusto na pud sila mo experience sa lahi na pud nga lugar, which is kanang mga bukid like Mingaw ana. Brother Armin Luestro, with his practical wisdom and experiences, has observed the possible effect of television violence on the young. So, he issued guidelines on television viewing for children. He says that good values instilled on children are sometimes removed from the consciousness of young people towards the television violence. He is a former secretary of the Department of Education, and he possibly learned so much about the consequence of such situation on the young. However, in practical wisdom, it guides the conduct of making morally right choices and actions. What does it identify as the proper and right thing to do? By Aristotle is the middle, intermediate, or Mesotes for the Greeks that is aimed by a morally virtuous person. Defining the middle becomes the proper tool by which one can arrive at the proper way of doing things. Based on Aristotle, a morally virtuous person is concerned with achieving a proper action in a manner that is neither excessive nor deficient. Morally virtuous person is something that dili siya dali masuko o dili po siya silang sa kinabuhi. The point is naa siya sa balance, naa siya sa tunga, ug kabalo siya mo analyze sa bisan unsa nga situation na siya. A person that knows how to analyze or balance every situation before putting conclusion is the ideal of morally virtuous person. So take note guys nga ang tao nga kabalo mo balance, mo analyze sa bisan unsa nga situation before siya mo conclude ug mo react, mao na ang ideal morally virtuous person para kay Aristotle. To let you find balance in your behavior, we need to target our Mesotes. So, we should know how to balance this one in order to achieve the virtuous man and to perform also a morally virtuous action. Example, if someone accuses you of stealing without proper evidence, without valid evidence that you really steal, the part of reacting it in an excessive manner is to be impolite, to get mad or angry. Well, deficient manner, when one doesn't acknowledge the accusations, he would always be labeled as what? As guilty. Why? Because he or she is not explaining nor defending hers or herself. So it's really important here to assess and ask the self what is the right thing to do in order for you to be a morally virtuous man. So in targeting the Mesotes, he or she is need to explain his side or the median of all action. The main purpose of Mesotes is to find balanced action upon the behavior. Our feelings, passions, and actions have its own middle point. If we know how to find the middle point of Mesotes, it is not hard for us to target or to do the right thing or right action. Well, if you already distinguish how to react on things and how to target the Mesotes, most likely we will conclude to the right action. Aristotle's discussion ultimately leads to defining what is moral virtue is. A state of character that concerned with choice, lying in mean, that is, the mean relative to us. This being determined by a rational principle and by that principle by which the man of practical wisdom would determine it. Okay, so what is a moral virtue? Moral virtue is firstly the condition arrived at by a person who has a character identified out of her habitual exercise of a particular actions. One's character is seen as a growth in terms of the continuous preference for the good. Secondly, the action that normally manifests feelings and passions is chosen because it is the middle. The middle does not fall short or excessive of the proper proportion by which these feelings or passions should be expressed. Aristotle adds that the middle is relative to us. This does not imply that makes totally depends on what person identified the middle. This means that in choosing the middle, one is looking at the situation and not at oneself in identifying the proper way that feelings and passions should be dispensed. Thirdly, the rational faculty that serves as a guide for the proper identification of the middle is practical wisdom. Differences of virtuous person and moral person. Virtuous person learns from her experiences and therefore develops the capacity to know the proper way of carrying out the feelings, passions, and the actions. The rational faculties of this person, specifically practical wisdom, aid in making a virtuous person develop these habits of doing the good. While the moral person in this sense is also someone who is wise. Habit is not simply born out repetitive and non-thought of activities in a person. One sees Aristotle's attempt to establish the union between the person's moral action and knowledge that enables him to achieve a man's function. Aristotle also clarifies further that not all feelings, passions, and actions have a middle point. Aristotle also provides example of particular virtues and the corresponding excess and deficiencies of these. So this table shows some of the virtue and their vices. It includes excess, middle, and the deficiencies. Excess includes impulsiveness, recklessness, and prodigality, while in the middle, self-control, courage, and liberality. And the last, the deficiency, indecisiveness, cowardice, and meanness. In this table, Aristotle identifies the virtue of courage as the middle, and between the vices of being coward and reckless. Cowardice is a deficiency in terms of feelings and passions. This means that one lacks the capacity to master enough the bravery of carrying herself appropriately in a given situation. Recklessness, on the other hand, is an excess in terms of one's feelings and actions, or passions. With this regard, one acts with a surplus of guts that she overdoes an act in such rashness and without any deliberation. It is only through the middle that a person is able to manifest her feelings, passions, and actions virtuously. For Aristotle, being a superfluous with regard in manifesting virtue is no longer an ethical act because one has gone beyond the middle. Being overly courageous or super courageous, for instance, does not make someone more virtuous because precisely in this condition she has gone beyond the middle and therefore has moved out from the state of that virtues. Therefore, one can always be excessive in her action, but an act that is virtuous cannot go beyond the middle. Filipinos have the enchant of using superlative words like over, super, to the max, and sobra in describing a particular act that morally identify as virtuous. Perhaps Aristotle's view in prescribing a clearer way by which Filipino can better understand it.
Hello everyone, my name is Christian Jericho P. Espino and this is my part, the summary. Aristotle's virtue ethics start with recognizing that happiness is the ultimate purpose or telos of a person. As the ultimate purpose, happiness is deemed as the final and self-sufficient end of a person. It is by realizing the highest goal of a person that she achieves happiness that is also considered as the greatest good. Attaining happiness is arrived at when she performs her function, which is to act in accordance to reason in an outstanding manner. It is in doing her function well that virtue, excellence, or arity is realized. To carry out the task of performing her function well, the person has to understand the structure of the soul where her reason will operate. Aristotle shows that human soul is divided into the irrational and rational faculties. The vegetative aspect of the irrational part of the soul cannot be directed by reason because it does the natural processes of the soul that are responsible for the physical growth. The appetitive aspect of the irrational part of the soul, on the other hand, is driven by impulses which are, in general, contrary to reason but can be acted out obeying the dictates of reason. Therefore, reason can manage the appetitive aspect and impulses can be handled well by a person. The rational faculty of the soul is the part where excellence can be attained. Part of the rational faculty of the soul is the intellectual aspect concerned with the act of knowing. Excellence of this faculty is achieved through learning. One learns well, that is why she gained philosophical and practical wisdom. Philosophical wisdom is the knowledge of general principle that constitute reality, while practical wisdom is the knowledge of determining the appropriate action in a given situation. One can learn from experience and therefore can gain sufficient understanding on what to do. Aristotle points out that having intellectual excellence does not make one into a morally good person. Knowing the good in being able to determine the appropriate action in a given situation do not make her do the good automatically. Practical wisdom, as such, is still in the realm of the intellectual aspect of the soul. The moral aspect of the rational faculty concerns itself with the act of doing the good. She becomes virtuous or excellence in doing the good by habitual performance. To be a morally virtuous individual is a constant carrying out of the act of goodness. The unethical person, on the other hand, is someone who habitually performs bad deeds. The habitual action for Aristotle is what forms the character of the person. Her identity is associated with accomplishing the good or bad action. Virtue ethics is concerned primarily with the task of developing a good character. Aristotle sees the development of one's character as the constant interaction between the faculties of the rational part of the soul. Practical wisdom is deemed as a necessary ingredient in guiding the moral faculty in doing the appropriate action. Practical wisdom identifies the right action and the moral faculty executes it. What practical wisdom identifies as the right action according to Aristotle is the Mesotes or the middle measure of an action, feeling, or passion. The middle is always in between an action, feeling, or passion that is deficient or excessive. Nothing is lacking or it is too much from an act that is morally good. For Aristotle, virtue is the good in between vices. To sum up, moral virtue, according to Aristotle, is a state of character, which habitual acts according to the middle measure that practical wisdom identify as the moral choice that should be acted upon, given the concrete situation that presented to the person. The goal of virtue ethics is to promote the maturity of the character of the person. Building a good character is a task and responsibility of every person.